The sun hadn't even cleared the ridge behind the old barn when Thomas Grady heard the crunch of tires on gravel. His boots, worn thin from 3 decades of early mornings and long days in the field, scuffed the dirt as he stepped out onto his porch. The chill in the air clung to his flannel shirt, but it wasn't the cold that made him pause, it was the black SUV pulling up to his gate. Again. 3 men stepped out, all wearing dark suits that didn't belong on a farm. One of them, the tallest, adjusted his tie like it mattered out here. Thomas squinted. He already knew what they were here for. They'd been circling for weeks like vultures, carrying paperwork and polite threats. But today felt different. There was a finality in the way they approached. "You can't keep doing this," Thomas said, his voice calm but cracked with exhaustion. "This land's been in my family for generations." The man in the middle, Mr. Callahan, the one with the smooth voice and empty eyes, offered a rehearsed smile. "Mr. Grady, we respect your legacy, but progress waits for no one. The development is already funded. Your eviction is official as of this morning." Eviction. The word hit harder than he expected, even though he'd seen it coming. His fists clenched, not in anger, but helplessness. He glanced past them, over the fence line and into the rolling fields that had once fed half the county. That land wasn't just soil and seed, it was where his father taught him how to work, where his wife planted wildflowers after Sunday church, where his son had taken his first steps before the army took him away. "You've got until sundown to clear out," Callahan added, already turning back toward his SUV. Thomas didn't move. He just stared at the old tractor sitting under the lean-to, rusted from age but still dependable, unlike promises from suits and developers. He didn't say a word as they drove off, kicking up dust that settled on the porch steps like ashes. He stayed there, rooted in place, long after the sound of tires faded. Later that day, with the sun sliding low and casting long shadows across the fields, Thomas stood in his empty house. Most of the furniture was already gone, sold or donated, piece by piece, as the court battles dragged on. The kitchen still smelled faintly of his wife's cornbread, though she'd been gone 5 years now. Cancer took her before the land ever could. He picked up a framed photo from the mantel, his son, Eli, in uniform, grinning in front of an American flag. Eli had joined the army straight out of high school. Said he wanted to fight for something bigger than himself. That was almost 10 years ago. The last letter he got from him came a month ago, stamped from some base in the Middle East. Eli didn't know about the eviction. Thomas didn't have the heart to tell him. As night fell, Thomas climbed into the old truck and drove to the edge of the property. He parked under the same oak tree where he used to tie swings for Eli. He sat there in silence, watching the stars blink to life, his heart heavy and his hands motionless on the steering wheel. There was nothing left to do but wait for morning, wait to be pushed off the land he'd bled for. But the next day, something happened that no one in the county would ever forget. It started with a low rumble, like a storm brewing underground. Birds scattered from the trees, and the cattle near the edge of the fence began to panic. Thomas was halfway through packing the last of his tools into the truck when he heard it, that unmistakable thumping in the sky, deep and rhythmic. He looked up. An Apache helicopter, U.S. military, dark, powerful, and terrifying, appeared over the tree line, flying low, so low that the dust from the dirt road rose in waves. Thomas ducked instinctively, shielding his eyes as the chopper circled once, then descended like it had a purpose. It didn't land near the farmhouse. No, it landed right in the middle of his freshly tilled field, its blade still spinning as it kicked up earth and wind like a miniature tornado. Thomas stumbled backward, watching in disbelief as the cockpit opened. Out stepped a figure in full gear, helmet under one arm, boots thudding against the cracked earth. The man walked with urgency, determination. And when he got close enough, Thomas dropped the wrench in his hand. Eli? His son, who hadn't been home in years, stood before him, older, harder, but with the same steady gaze he had as a boy. No words were exchanged at first. Just an embrace that carried the weight of everything, years apart, letters unanswered, and now this, whatever this was. "I heard," Eli finally said. "The land. The eviction. I had to come." Thomas blinked, still stunned. "In a helicopter?" Eli gave a half-smile. "We're not here on vacation." Before Thomas could ask more, 3 more soldiers stepped out of the chopper. Not just soldiers, high-ranking. And they weren't looking at the farmhouse. They were scanning the field, taking notes, using GPS equipment. One of them handed Eli a tablet. The air shifted. Something bigger than personal business was happening. Thomas watched them, confusion battling with cautious hope. "Eli, what's going on?" His son looked at him and said something that made the hairs on Thomas's neck rise. "There's something under this land, Dad. Something the military wants protected, not developed." Thomas stared at him. "Protected? What do you mean?" Eli glanced around. "I can't say much yet. But this isn't just your farm anymore. It might be a key piece of national defense." Thomas staggered back a step. National defense? On his farm? All these years, he thought the fight was about money, zoning, corporate greed. But now it felt like something much larger was at play. Something hidden beneath the soil he'd worked his whole life. Something that made billion-dollar developers seem like pawns in a much bigger game. And just like that, the battle wasn't over. It was only beginning. Would the military presence stop the developers? Why had no one told him sooner? And what exactly was under his land that had brought an Apache helicopter and a classified operation to his doorstep? Thomas didn't have the answers yet. But the silence of the fields was gone, replaced by the thrum of mystery, danger, and something far beyond anything he'd ever imagined. And as the helicopter spun up again, casting long shadows across the ground, one thing was clear. The land wasn't giving up its secrets quietly. Thomas couldn't sleep that night. Even after the roar of the helicopter faded into the distance, the questions only got louder. He sat on the edge of his bed, boots still on, staring out the window at the field that had suddenly become something more than farmland. He kept thinking about Eli's face, harder, older, but still his boy. And the words he said kept replaying like a record stuck in place. This might be a key piece of national defense. What did that mean? What could possibly be buried under the soil he'd plowed and planted for 35 years? Oil? A military device? Some kind of underground bunker? None of it made sense. The next morning, Thomas didn't need coffee. Adrenaline was doing the job. As the sun rose over the fields, turning the sky a soft orange, a convoy of military trucks arrived, quietly, with no fanfare, like they were trying not to draw attention. Men and women in uniform moved with purpose. They set up a perimeter and even installed a temporary command tent on the edge of the property. A man in fatigues approached him. "Mr. Grady, we'll be working here for a few days. You can stay in the house, but we'll need access to the southern field and the creek." Thomas just nodded, still trying to process how his eviction had turned into a federal operation. "Is my son with you?" he asked. The soldier shook his head. He had to report back to base. "He'll be in touch." That answer didn't sit well, but Thomas kept quiet. He walked back toward the barn, passing his tractor, which now sat like a relic from another time. Men with strange equipment moved around it, measuring things, digging shallow holes, placing sensors. None of them said much, and when they did, it was all clipped and coded. By mid-morning, a few neighbors had started slowing down on the road out front. A couple even got out to ask what was going on, but the military presence kept them from walking too close. The developers didn't show up. Maybe they'd been warned. Maybe they were just regrouping. Either way, Thomas wasn't sure if he should feel relieved or more afraid. Inside the house, he stared at the photograph of his wife again. "You always said this land had a soul," he whispered. "I just thought you meant the memories." He spent most of that day watching, listening, trying to make sense of what was happening. But by evening, things took another strange turn. One of the soldiers came running out of the southern field, calling for his commanding officer. The others gathered quickly, huddled over a device with a screen that kept blinking red. Thomas couldn't hear exactly what they were saying, but the urgency was clear. Later, when the sun dipped low again, 2 unmarked black helicopters arrived. Not military, not in any way Thomas recognized. Men in suits stepped out, flanked by more security. One of them was a woman with sharp eyes and a cold smile. She walked right past Thomas like he wasn't there and headed straight into the tent. That night, as the lights from the temporary setup glowed against the darkness, Thomas sat on the porch and watched. His land had become a battleground of quiet conversations and veiled authority. No one told him anything. Not about the blinking red signals. Not about the unmarked helicopters. Not about the strange, rhythmic clicking sound that started coming from the woods around midnight. He didn't sleep again. The following morning, a man who introduced himself only as Director Harlow came to the house. He was polite, firm, and clearly not someone who liked small talk. "Mr. Grady," he said, "you're probably wondering why we're here." Thomas nodded slowly. "That'd be a good place to start. There's a structure beneath your southern field. A buried object. We believe it dates back several decades, possibly older. It emits low-frequency signals on a looped pattern. We don't know what it is yet. But it's not natural, and it wasn't placed there by any modern agency." Thomas's brows furrowed. "You mean it's foreign?" Harlow hesitated. "We're not sure. Could be experimental. Could be abandoned. But whatever it is, it responds to military-grade scans. And it's protected, deep, reinforced. Which is why your son was involved. He flagged your property when satellite data showed anomalies during his deployment. That hit Thomas like a punch to the chest. You're saying Eli knew about this? He suspected. Didn't have confirmation until last week. When we saw the eviction order come through, he called us. Said we needed to act before developers got their hands on the land." Thomas sat back, stunned. All this time, he thought Eli was just a soldier doing his duty overseas. But now he realized, his son had been watching over him, over the land, from a distance. And whatever this buried thing was, it mattered enough for the government to step in, fast. Later that afternoon, they started digging. Not with shovels, but with specialized equipment that drilled clean, silent holes in the earth, feeding tiny cameras deep underground. The footage they showed Thomas later was grainy, hard to understand. But even to his untrained eyes, it looked strange. Metallic. Geometric. Like some kind of chamber or vault. One of the soldiers referred to it under his breath as the grid. That night, Thomas lay awake again, his mind racing. What if something was hidden there during wartime? Some Cold War relic? A secret experiment gone dark? Or worse, what if it wasn't meant to be found at all? Around midnight, his phone rang. It hadn't rung in days. When he picked it up, it was Eli. "I can't talk long," his son said. "But I need you to listen. If they start moving equipment in from DC, pack a bag." "What? Why?" "Because whatever's under that field, it's active. And I don't know if they can control it." Thomas felt his skin go cold. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "I tried," Eli said, his voice strained. "I wanted to come back sooner. But this thing, it's classified above my clearance now. I'm risking even calling you." "But it's our land, son," Thomas said. "We've lived here all our lives." "I know," Eli replied. "But now it's not just ours. Be careful, Dad. And don't trust anyone who tells you they have all the answers. Some of them are just guessing. Others are lying." Then the call dropped. Thomas stood there in the dark, heart pounding, staring out the window toward the southern field. He thought about the suits, the blinking signals, the strange feeling in his chest that started every time he walked near the tent line. And he knew, deep down, something wasn't right. Whatever was buried beneath his farm wasn't meant to be unearthed. And yet, they'd already started digging. He stepped outside into the night, flashlight in hand, walking slowly toward the field. The air was still. Too still. And far off in the distance, the rhythmic clicking started again. The rhythmic clicking grew louder as Thomas walked toward the southern field. He could hear it now, cutting through the silence of the night like a ticking clock. His flashlight flickered against the dark, casting shadows on the ground that seemed to stretch unnaturally long. He stopped when he reached the edge of the field, where the military had set up their command post. The air felt thicker here, almost charged with anticipation, like something was about to happen, something he wasn't supposed to witness. He took a deep breath, glancing back toward the house. His mind raced with questions. Why had Eli called him? Why did they need to keep this secret? And what was really buried under the ground that had so much importance to the government? But as he stared into the distance, something moved out there, just beyond the glow of the floodlights. His pulse quickened. Someone was out there, crouching low to the ground, almost invisible in the shadows. Thomas instinctively reached for the rifle leaning against the porch, though he had no intention of using it. Not yet. The figure didn't seem to notice him, moving silently, deliberately toward the tent where the military and the unmarked suits had been gathered earlier. Thomas followed, staying low behind the rows of tall corn stalks. He didn't want to be seen, but his curiosity pulled him forward. As he got closer, he could make out a face in the dim light. It was a woman, wearing a military jacket, though it didn't match the standard issue. Her eyes were sharp, scanning the area like she was searching for something. Thomas couldn't make out her expression, but there was something about the way she moved, like she knew exactly where she was going and what she was about to do. He watched as she approached one of the soldiers guarding the perimeter, and without a word, she slipped a small object into his hand. It was too small for Thomas to identify from this distance, but he could tell the soldier didn't question her. There was a familiarity between them, like they had worked together before. The soldier pocketed the object without a second glance. Thomas's heart skipped. Who was she? And what was she doing here? He couldn't help but feel like there were pieces of this puzzle that no one had bothered to explain to him. His land was now under control by forces he didn't understand. His son was involved in something classified, and Eli hadn't even told him everything. The whole situation felt wrong, like he was standing in the middle of a storm he couldn't see. As he turned to leave, a voice behind him stopped him dead in his tracks. "You're not supposed to be here." Thomas spun around to see another soldier, this one younger, his eyes wide with the unease of being caught off guard. His hand was hovering near his sidearm, though he didn't pull it out. I was just," Thomas stammered, unsure how to explain himself. "I live here. This is my land." The soldier studied him for a moment, then relaxed. "I wasn't trying to scare you. I thought you were someone else." "Someone else?" Thomas asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Who?" Before the soldier could answer, a voice cut through the night. "Is there a problem here, Sergeant?" It was the woman from before. She was walking toward them, her pace confident, almost predatory. The young soldier straightened up, saluting her with a quick motion. "No problem, ma'am," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "Just a misunderstanding." She nodded, her eyes flicking to Thomas, then back to the soldier. "You're dismissed." The young soldier quickly turned and walked away, leaving Thomas alone with the woman. Her gaze lingered on him for a moment longer than necessary, then she spoke. "You should go inside, Mr. Grady. Things are about to get complicated." Thomas didn't want to trust her, didn't want to believe anything she was saying. But there was something in the way she looked at him, like she knew more than she was letting on. He could feel the weight of her words pressing down on him, but before he could respond, she turned on her heel and disappeared back into the shadows. His mind was spinning. Things are about to get complicated. That didn't sound good. And it certainly didn't help that everything felt so out of his control. The land he had worked all his life to keep had turned into something else entirely. The government, the military, and even the strange woman, none of it made sense. It was as though his simple life had collided with forces far greater than anything he had ever imagined. The next few days passed in a blur. The military continued their excavation, bringing in more heavy equipment and drones to scan the land. Every time Thomas tried to get closer to the site, someone stopped him. The soldiers, the suits, they kept him at a distance. And Eli? He hadn't called back, hadn't shown up. Thomas couldn't shake the feeling that he was being kept in the dark on purpose. But as the excavation deepened, so did his unease. The clicking sound was growing louder, more insistent, almost rhythmic, like a countdown to something unknown. The soldiers seemed to be on edge now, exchanging quick, worried glances when they thought no one was watching. And then, late one afternoon, everything changed. Thomas was sitting on the porch, his thoughts racing, when a convoy of black SUVs rolled onto the property. No military vehicles this time, just sleek, expensive cars with tinted windows. The kind of vehicles that screamed power. They stopped right in front of the command tent, and the men who stepped out were not soldiers. They were something else entirely, suits, briefcases, the kind of people who didn't ask questions, just gave orders. Among them was the woman from the night Thomas had followed her. She was walking beside a man who looked like he could buy the whole county with a snap of his fingers. As they entered the tent, the air seemed to shift, suddenly tense, as if everyone was bracing for something to happen. Thomas stood, his heart pounding, as a familiar voice called out from behind him. "Dad!" It was Eli. He stood just outside the tent, in his military uniform, looking like a man caught between two worlds. Thomas hurried toward him, but before he could say anything, Eli held up his hand. "Don't ask," he said softly. "Just, don't ask." But Thomas couldn't help himself. "Eli, what is going on? Why all this? What are they looking for?" Eli's eyes darted toward the tent, then back to his father. His voice was low, barely a whisper. "It's not just the land, Dad. It's bigger than that. It's something that could change everything. And if we don't stop them..." Thomas's mind raced. "If we don't stop who?" But Eli didn't answer. Instead, he turned and walked toward the tent, disappearing behind the heavy canvas. Thomas stood frozen in place, the weight of the words hanging over him like a dark cloud. His son knew more than he was letting on. And whatever was buried under the soil of his farm, whatever it was more dangerous than he could have ever imagined. The next few hours felt like days. Thomas stood at the edge of the camp, the weight of Eli's words still heavy in his chest. The black SUVs were gone, replaced by a tense stillness that hung over the farm like a dark cloud. The military had become more guarded, their eyes always scanning, always on alert. And the clicking sound, it was almost deafening now. Every few seconds, it seemed to grow louder, like it was coming from deep beneath the earth, echoing through the very ground. Inside the command tent, voices were raised in urgent conversation, though Thomas couldn't make out the specifics. He tried to get closer, but the soldiers blocked his path. They seemed more on edge than ever, exchanging nervous glances. The kind of looks you give when you know something's about to happen, but you're not sure exactly when. Eli hadn't come back out yet. Thomas hadn't seen him since their brief exchange, and that only made him more anxious. What had he meant when he said, "If we don't stop them"? Stop whom? And why hadn't Eli told him more? What kind of danger were they in? At dusk, the noise stopped. For the first time in days, the clicking fell silent. The soldiers seemed to relax, but there was something unsettling about the sudden calm. It was as if the earth itself had held its breath, waiting for something to happen. Thomas couldn't shake the feeling that they were getting closer to the heart of whatever had been buried under the field. He knew it wasn't just about the land anymore. It was something far bigger, something that could change the world as he knew it. But what was it? And why was Eli involved? He couldn't stand the waiting any longer. His hands were shaking as he grabbed the flashlight and made his way toward the southern field. The night had fallen quickly, and the shadows seemed to stretch longer than normal, like they were reaching out, pulling him closer to whatever secret was waiting in the earth. The air was thick with tension as he walked across the field, the soft hum of machinery in the distance. The soldiers were still on high alert, but now they had spread out, as if they were waiting for something. Thomas's heart raced with every step, the sound of his boots crunching on the dry soil breaking the eerie silence. As he reached the edge of the excavation site, his breath caught in his throat. The ground was different now. Where they had dug before, there was nothing. But here, in the center of the southern field, a massive metallic structure had been revealed. It wasn't something that could have been built by any normal means. The edges were too sharp, too perfect. There were symbols etched into the surface, strange and unfamiliar, like a language he'd never seen before. And it wasn't just the size of it that was disturbing, it was the way it hummed. Thomas stepped closer, his eyes wide with disbelief. He could feel the energy in the air, vibrating, almost as if it were alive. He didn't know what he was looking at, but he knew this wasn't just a buried artifact. This was something else. Then he heard the sound of boots crunching behind him. He spun around to find the woman from the night before standing just a few feet away, her face cold and expressionless. "I told you to stay inside," she said, her voice calm but firm. Thomas didn't move. He couldn't. His eyes were still fixed on the structure in front of him. "What is it? What's under the ground?" The woman stepped closer, her gaze flicking from the object to Thomas. "You really want to know?" "I need to know," he whispered. "This is my land. This is my life." The woman seemed to hesitate for a moment, but then she took a deep breath. "It's not just your land anymore. It never was. The government, no, it's bigger than that, they've been watching this place for years. It's not just an artifact. It's a weapon." Thomas blinked, trying to process the words. "A weapon? What kind of weapon?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she knelt beside the metallic structure, running her fingers along the strange symbols. This was built during the Cold War. A prototype, hidden away for decades. It's designed to, well, we don't even know its full potential. But it's capable of something catastrophic. It can disrupt communications, control systems, even power grids. And if activated, it could shut down everything in a matter of hours. Thomas felt the blood drain from his face. A weapon of that magnitude, hidden under his field? It didn't make sense. Why would it be here? Why did they bury it? The woman stood up, looking at him with cold, calculating eyes. It was buried because no one could trust it. Too much power in the wrong hands, you know. But it's been dormant for years, waiting. And now, someone wants to wake it up. Thomas took a step back. Who? Before she could answer, the sound of approaching helicopters broke through the silence. Thomas turned his head to see 3 military choppers flying low, their blades cutting through the air with an ominous whine. They were heading straight for the field, landing in a circle around the excavation site. The soldiers began to move quickly, taking positions around the area, their weapons drawn. The woman's face turned grim. She stepped closer to Thomas, her voice urgent. "We don't have much time. If they activate it, everything changes. Everything." Thomas's heart hammered in his chest. He could feel the ground beneath him vibrating again, as if the earth itself were reacting to the helicopters. The metallic structure was glowing now, faintly, like it was awakening from a long slumber. The soldiers started to set up equipment, their movements precise, almost mechanical. But there was a sense of tension in the air, like they were preparing for something they didn't fully understand. The woman grabbed Thomas's arm, pulling him toward the trees at the edge of the field. "Come on. We need to move." He didn't resist. He couldn't. Something told him that staying where he was would be a mistake. They ran, the sound of the helicopters growing louder, until they reached a small clearing just beyond the trees. There, they stopped, breathless. "Why are they doing this?" Thomas asked, still trying to make sense of it all. The woman looked at him, her eyes cold. "Because they think they can control it." Thomas shook his head. "You're telling me they're going to try and activate that thing? They have no idea what they're dealing with." The woman didn't answer. She just stared back toward the field, her face pale, her body tense. And in that moment, Thomas realized something. This wasn't just about the land anymore. It was about control, power, and something far more dangerous than he ever could have imagined. And no one, not even Eli, could predict what would happen next. As they stood in the clearing, the sound of the helicopters grew louder, the noise almost deafening now. The woman, whose name Thomas still didn't know, glanced at him with a mix of urgency and resolve. She looked toward the military encampment, her brow furrowed. The dim glow from the metallic structure out in the field flickered like a warning signal, flashing ominously in the night. Thomas could feel the air growing heavier with every passing second, the weight of the situation pressing down on him like a vice. But just as he was about to ask what they were going to do next, a voice rang out from behind them. "Dad!" Thomas froze. His heart skipped a beat. The voice had come from deeper in the woods, just behind them. It was Eli. Thomas's breath caught in his throat. He spun around to see his son emerging from the trees, his uniform dark and rumpled, eyes wide with something that looked like fear, or was it guilt? Eli's gaze locked onto Thomas, and for a moment, they just stared at each other, the father's heart racing with questions. What was Eli doing here? Why was he separated from the military? And more importantly, why did he look so shaken? "Dad, we need to get out of here," Eli said, his voice urgent. "They're about to make a move. You don't understand what's going on. The people behind this, they aren't who you think they are." Thomas's stomach twisted. "What do you mean? Who are they, Eli?" Eli glanced nervously over his shoulder, as if making sure no one else was nearby. I can't explain everything right now. But you have to trust me. They're not military. They're not the government. It's worse." Before Thomas could respond, the woman beside him grabbed his arm, pulling him back toward the woods. "We need to move now," she said, her voice low but fierce. "Eli's right. We don't have much time. If you want to stop this, we have to act fast." But Eli stepped forward, blocking their path. His eyes flicked between them. "No. I need to tell you something first. It's too late to stop this, but we can still." Suddenly, the ground beneath them rumbled. At first, it was faint, like a distant earthquake. But then it grew stronger, the vibrations trembling through the earth until they were almost unbearable. Thomas felt the earth beneath his feet shift, and the night air became thick with an electric charge. In the distance, the metallic structure in the field began to hum louder, almost resonating with the tremors. "What the hell is happening?" Thomas gasped. The woman's face turned pale. "It's activating. They've started the sequence." Thomas's pulse quickened as the rumbling intensified. The trees around them shook, and for a split second, everything went still. The only sound now was the low hum from the field, like the very ground was alive, reacting to something that no one could control. "Dad, listen to me," Eli said, his voice shaky now. "I didn't want to be involved in this. I thought I could keep you safe, but it's bigger than we thought. The people who are behind this, they've been watching us for years. The military is just a front. They've been testing the weapon. Testing it for something much worse." "What are you talking about, Eli?" Thomas asked, his voice rising with panic. "What do you mean, something worse?" Eli hesitated, his eyes darting toward the field. The hum was growing louder now, reverberating through the trees. The woman tightened her grip on Thomas's arm, her face tense with worry. They're not just interested in the weapon. It's not about control. It's about creating something they can't undo. Before Thomas could respond, the woman spoke again, her voice barely audible over the rising noise. It's not just about what's buried in the ground. It's about what it can unlock. And once it's unlocked, there's no going back. A sudden explosion of light illuminated the night sky. The flash was blinding, like a miniature sun had just ignited in the field. Thomas's heart skipped a beat as he shielded his eyes, his mind racing to comprehend what was happening. The woman pulled him to the ground, shielding him from the blast, but the shockwave hit them moments later, throwing him backward into the dirt. For a split second, everything went dark. Thomas's head was spinning. He could barely focus, his vision blurred and his ears ringing. But he could hear it. The low, continuous hum was still there, now mixed with a strange static sound that made his skin crawl. It was as if the very air around them had thickened, charged with an unnatural energy. When he finally managed to sit up, Eli was kneeling beside him, his face pale, eyes wide with shock. "Dad, it's begun," Eli whispered. "It's not just a weapon. It's something else. It's a doorway." Thomas stared at his son, trying to make sense of his words. A doorway? What the hell was he talking about? Before Thomas could ask more, the woman stood up, her face hard and determined. She glanced toward the field, where the strange structure was now pulsing with light, flickering erratically like a malfunctioning machine. "We don't have much time. We have to stop them from getting to it." Eli shook his head, his voice barely audible over the hum. "It's too late. They've already activated it. The sequence is in motion. All we can do now is try to contain the fallout." Thomas's mind raced. Contain the fallout? What did that even mean? He turned to the woman, his voice cracking. "What's going to happen if we can't stop it?" The woman's gaze was steely. "Something will open. Something that shouldn't exist. And once it's open, we may not be able to close it again." Thomas's stomach dropped. He didn't know what was unfolding before him, but one thing was certain, the stakes had just risen higher than he could have ever imagined. Whatever lay ahead, it was no longer just about his farm, his land, or even the military. It was about survival. And whatever had been buried under his feet was going to change everything. The lights in the field flickered one last time, then flared bright, so intense that Thomas had to look away. The sound grew to a deafening roar, drowning out everything else, and then, just as quickly as it had begun, the world went silent. The world around Thomas went utterly still. For a moment, everything seemed frozen, frozen in time, frozen in space. The strange humming sound that had permeated the air disappeared, replaced by an eerie, deafening silence. The ground no longer vibrated. The air didn't feel as heavy. It was as if the very energy that had been alive in the field had been sucked away, leaving only a hollow emptiness. Thomas slowly stood up, his legs shaking beneath him. His vision was blurry from the blast, but the sounds of his surroundings were crystal clear now, footsteps crunching on the dry earth, the rustle of the wind, the distant groan of metal from the glowing structure. It was still there, pulsing faintly, though no longer as bright or as powerful. Eli was the first to speak, his voice hoarse and full of disbelief. It's gone." The woman, still by his side, looked just as confused, her eyes scanning the field. "It can't be. They were so close. How could it just stop?" Thomas took a cautious step forward, his heart still racing. "What happened?" What did we just witness? Eli shook his head. I don't know. That wasn't supposed to happen. The sequence was triggered. It was supposed to open something. But it's like it was shut down from the inside. The woman narrowed her eyes at the structure. That's not possible. Something or someone stopped it. But who? A new, more intense rumble suddenly shook the ground beneath them, this time far stronger, as if the earth itself was about to tear apart. The structure in the field flashed again, faint at first, then with growing intensity, sending blinding beams of light into the sky. A low, almost primal growl of energy began to fill the air, the hum turning into a roar. Thomas's chest tightened, and his instincts screamed at him to run, to get as far away as possible. But he couldn't. His feet wouldn't move. It was as if the air itself was holding him in place, locking him in a moment of suspended terror. That's it, the woman said suddenly, her voice sharp with realization. They did it. Someone activated it. But it's not what they expected. They don't know how to control it. Eli looked panicked. What is it? What's happening? Before she could answer, a shadow appeared above them, a dark shape that seemed to block out the moonlight. Thomas's heart skipped a beat as he looked up, eyes squinting in disbelief. A massive helicopter hovered just above the clearing, its blades whipping through the air with incredible force. But it wasn't any ordinary chopper. This one was different, larger, sleek, almost futuristic in design. Black as night, it seemed to absorb the very light around it, like it didn't belong in the world they knew. Get down, the woman shouted, but it was too late. The helicopter's engines roared, and within seconds, the sound of gunfire filled the air, punctuating the night with sharp, violent cracks. Thomas ducked instinctively, pulling Eli to the ground, the woman following suit. Bullets sprayed in all directions, but none seemed to hit their mark. The helicopter's weaponry fired wildly, tearing into the earth, into the trees, and into the metallic structure in the field. But then, the unexpected happened. The metallic structure, still pulsing with faint energy, began to shift. The ground beneath it cracked open, revealing something beneath the surface. A massive, gleaming opening, like a portal slowly beginning to widen. The light from the structure intensified, glowing brighter and brighter until it became unbearable, sending waves of energy that rippled across the field. The helicopter started to descend rapidly, the pilot obviously trying to get closer to the portal. But as the chopper reached the center of the glowing area, something else happened. A pulse of light shot out from the structure, colliding directly with the helicopter. The impact was instant and violent. The helicopter's engine sputtered, sparks flying from every corner of its frame. No, the woman screamed. It wasn't supposed to. The helicopter's tail snapped like a twig, and the entire craft spiraled downward, crashing violently into the field. The explosion was massive, flames shooting into the air, debris scattering in all directions. Thomas scrambled to his feet, dragging Eli with him as the woman pulled him toward the woods. We have to go. Now. The portal beneath them was widening rapidly now, the glow from within brighter than anything Thomas had ever seen. The air was thick with heat and energy, and the very ground seemed to be quaking under the pressure. He could feel it now, the reality around them seemed to warp, as though the laws of nature themselves were beginning to bend. Just as they reached the edge of the clearing, there was a sudden, deafening silence. The roar of the flames and the crash of the helicopter stopped. The air grew still, heavy, like the calm before a storm. Thomas turned around, eyes wide with fear and disbelief. From the glowing portal, a figure emerged. It wasn't a person, not in the way they knew it. The shape was humanoid, but it shimmered, its form flickering in and out of focus. It was tall, taller than any human, and its features were strange, distorted, almost alien. It looked like something out of a nightmare, its face a blur of shifting colors, its limbs unnaturally long, bending in ways that no human body could. It stood at the center of the glowing light, surveying the world with an eerie calm. Then, with a voice that was not entirely human, it spoke. "You shouldn't have disturbed it." The words echoed in their minds, not just in their ears. Before Thomas could react, the figure raised one hand, and the very earth seemed to respond. The air around them crackled as though something far more powerful than nature itself was reaching into their world. Eli stepped back, fear in his eyes. "It's them, they were the ones trying to bring this thing back. They've been waiting for us to activate it. All of this, the land, the military, the digging, they knew it would open the portal." But the figure wasn't finished. With a final, otherworldly gesture, it lifted both hands toward the sky, and the entire world around them seemed to shudder, as though it were preparing for something far worse than the chaos they had just witnessed. And in that moment, as Thomas stood frozen in place, he realized one undeniable truth: whatever they had unleashed wasn't just a weapon. It wasn't just a doorway. It was the beginning of something none of them could control. As the figure in the center of the glowing portal raised its hands, Thomas's heart pounded in his chest. The world around them seemed to stretch and warp, reality itself bending under the weight of whatever force had just been unleashed. He wanted to run, to grab Eli and the woman and disappear into the woods, but his feet were frozen in place. The air felt heavy, like they were standing on the edge of something they couldn't fully comprehend. The figure's voice, strange and distant, reverberated once more in their minds, sending a chill down Thomas's spine. "You are too late. The world you know is not what it seems. You opened the door. Now, there is no going back." Eli, wide-eyed with fear, took a step forward. "What do you want from us? We didn't mean to." The figure's head tilted slightly, as though it was studying him. "What you meant does not matter. You awakened something ancient. And now, you must face the consequences." Thomas looked at the woman beside him, her face grim and resigned. She had known more than she had let on. This whole time, she had been a part of something bigger, something far beyond what any of them could understand. It was clear now that her role had always been to guide them to this moment, though the path had been full of lies, half-truths, and hidden motives. But now, there was no more hiding. They were standing in the presence of something far greater than themselves, something that had been waiting for this very moment to arrive. "Stop it," Thomas shouted, his voice hoarse, barely audible over the crackling energy around them. "We didn't ask for this. We're just trying to protect our land, our families. This wasn't part of the plan." The figure's eyes, if they could even be called eyes, narrowed. "The land you speak of is but a small piece of a much larger puzzle. The developers, the military, they were only pawns in the game. This land was always meant to be the key, and now that the door has opened, you will understand." As the figure spoke, a terrible sound filled the air, a low rumble, like thunder. The ground beneath them trembled again, more violently this time, and the light from the portal intensified. It wasn't just a portal anymore. It was as if the boundaries between their world and another were slowly disintegrating, the two realities on the verge of merging. Eli reached out to Thomas, desperation in his eyes. "Dad, we have to do something. If we don't stop this, everything will change. We'll lose everything. Thomas nodded, his mind racing. The world around them seemed to be collapsing. The trees shook. The ground cracked open. The glow from the portal was almost blinding now, and Thomas knew that if they didn't act soon, whatever this thing was would spread to every corner of their world. The woman grabbed Thomas's arm, pulling him toward the portal. We can't stop it, but we can slow it down. We have to close it from the inside. The key is in the structure. If we can reach it, we can reverse the process. Thomas's heart skipped a beat. You're saying we can close the portal? But how? The woman's gaze was intense. The key is buried within the portal itself. The structure you saw earlier, it's more than just a machine. It's a bridge, a connection between your world and what lies beyond. If we can reach it before the connection solidifies, we may be able to sever it. Without waiting for further explanation, she ran toward the glowing structure. Thomas followed, dragging Eli along with him. The air crackled with energy, and the ground seemed to buck beneath their feet, as though it was alive, fighting them every step of the way. They reached the center of the field, where the structure stood, its metallic surface shimmering with unnatural light. It was unlike anything Thomas had ever seen, too advanced, too alien. And as they approached, the light seemed to pulsate, almost as if it were aware of their presence. This is it, the woman said, her voice tight with urgency. We have to act quickly. We don't have much time. Eli's hand trembled in Thomas's, but his voice was steady. I'm with you, Dad. Let's do this. Thomas's chest tightened. He had never felt so uncertain, so vulnerable. But in that moment, with the fate of everything hanging in the balance, he knew he had no choice. They had to stop whatever was on the other side of this portal from coming through. Whatever it was beyond human understanding, beyond anything they could control. The woman knelt down, her fingers tracing intricate symbols etched into the surface of the structure. As she worked, the ground shook again, more violently this time, the energy from the portal growing stronger, pulling them in like a powerful magnet. Stay focused, the woman muttered, her voice strained. The key lies in the symbols. If we can align them with the sequence, we can sever the connection. Thomas and Eli stood watch, hearts pounding in their chests as the woman worked feverishly. The air around them seemed to hum with a strange power, a low buzzing sound that made Thomas's skin crawl. He wanted to look away, to ignore the growing sense of dread gnawing at him, but he couldn't. There was no turning back now. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the woman's hands stopped moving. She took a deep breath, her face pale, sweat dripping down her brow. It's done, she whispered. Now, we pray. The ground beneath them seemed to groan in protest as the portal began to flicker, the light dimming slowly, the hum gradually fading. Thomas felt a surge of hope, maybe, just maybe, they had succeeded. But as the portal's light began to fade, the figure from beyond, the one who had spoken to them earlier, emerged from the glowing void once more. It was taller now, more defined, its form solidifying into something even more terrifying. The air around it was thick with an overwhelming energy, and Thomas could feel his heart race with fear. You cannot undo what has been done, the figure said, its voice a deep, resonating echo. This is only the beginning. Before they could react, the figure raised one hand, and the ground cracked open beneath them. A shockwave of energy sent them sprawling, knocking them to the ground. But just as Thomas thought all hope was lost, the woman reached out, her voice barely a whisper. It's not over. There's still one more chance. With everything they had left, Thomas, Eli, and the woman surged forward, diving into the very heart of the structure. The ground beneath them shifted violently, and for a split second, it felt like the world was coming apart. And then, with a final, blinding flash of light, the world went silent. When Thomas opened his eyes, he found himself lying on the cold, hard ground of his farm. The portal was gone. The helicopters were gone. The strange figure, the woman, and the terrifying force they had unleashed, all of it had vanished. For the first time in what felt like forever, he took a deep breath. His land was safe. His family was safe. But as he looked around at the empty field, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed, something that could never be undone. The world had shifted, and no one would ever be the same again.